Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626, as we shift gears here and take a look at a vote that has been taken in the House. At the end of the Obama administration, there were stricter privacy regulations imposed on Internet providers, and the Republican House has voted now to get rid of those restrictions. Here's more from John Stolnis.
The House voted 215 to 205 to reverse that order, meaning IPs like Comcast, AT&T, and Verizon can sell the browsing habits of customers to potential advertisers. Republicans didn't like the rule because it didn't hold Google to the same standards and said it was unfair and confusing for consumers. The FCC under Obama said the rule was designed to give consumers more control over how Internet service providers share their information. The Senate had already passed a bill. It will now go to President Trump's desk for his signature. John Stolnis, Washington.
All right, so let's talk a bit about that in this portion of the program with Shawn Tuma, an attorney with a practice in cyber law and complex litigation at Scheef and Stone, L.L.P. Thank you for being with us tonight.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
All right. First of all, why didn't the Republicans simply vote to extend the protection to Google and Facebook and any other exceptions? Why this free-for-all?
Well, the way this works is Google, Facebook, the other big web companies are governed by the Federal Trade Commission, which used to govern the Internet service providers as well, but now the Internet service providers are governed by the Federal Communications Commission.
But these are all creations of Congress. I mean, it's not like, you know, we've set up the jurisdiction of the FTC or in the FCC, and it's sacrosanct. Congress can do anything they want to with those bodies or their jurisdiction.
Well, they have different standards, different regulatory bodies, and there was a case out of the Ninth Circuit recently, I believe it was last year, that specifically held that the FTC did not have regulatory authority over these ISPs, whereas it does over the big web companies. So we do have two different bodies, and I'm guessing it was just easier for Congress to say, no, we're going to block what's here instead of applying it to the web companies. But in reality, if our objective is to protect the privacy, which is the stated objective here, then we should protect the privacy regardless of who's selling it, whether it's an ISP or whether it's a web company.
Exactly. And, you know, I mean, there's nothing that you just outlined. I'm sure that's a very good explanation of what's at play here, but none of it changes what I said in the beginning. All of these alphabet soup groups, these regulatories, are creations of Congress. They have no statute, rationale for existence other than the fact that Congress created them. Congress can do anything they want to with these bodies, and they could have changed that law very simply. Simply said from now on, the jurisdiction will be from the FTC to the FCC or vice versa. It would have been very simple. One clause, done deal, as long as it becomes a law after it passes the Senate and signed by the President. I mean, it sounds to me, I'll be very honest with you, what it sounds to me like, and I tend to be a rather conservative individual, it sounds to me like a lot of rich interests have simply let it be known that contributions to campaigns will go up if they have a chance to reap this windfall of dealing in our private information. That's what it sounds like. Now, maybe I'm being hyperly cynical or something here, but I cannot believe that on this issue of privacy that we have to depend on the Democratic Party and not the Republican Party, because it sounds like a craven sellout to me, and I don't like it one bit.
Well, Jim, I do agree with you that this is lobbying and this is politics at its finest, because the objective of protecting privacy is not effective here. It's not truly being met. And, you know, what you mentioned at the beginning, Congress doesn't have to act through either the FTC or the FCC. What they could do is simply pass a law that is supreme and paramount over those two regulatory bodies and say this is how our privacy will be handled with regard to these issues. But the problem is the American people don't really know what they want when it comes to these issues. They don't have the will or the resolve yet to implement strong privacy measures.
Well, now, that'd be a most interesting public polling question, wouldn't it? And here's the question, folks. Do you or do you not want your private information put up for bids by Internet service providers? Care to take a guess on what the results of that poll would be? I'd have to say 90% would say no.
But who are willing to go through a little bit of inconvenience to make it happen?
Well, we shouldn't have to. Now, I know that there are ways, and we can talk about some of these virtual private networks or something, VPNs they're called. There are companies out there, NordVPN, I'm told, that has seen a sharp increase in consumer interest in the days since the Senate voted on this. We shouldn't have to go through that tap dance. I mean, again, there's no legitimate reason for people who are already quite well-to-do making more money off of our private information. This is just indefensible unless you worship the marketplace.
I agree, Jim, but I'm not talking about using VPNs or the Tor network. I'm talking about what these rules really impacted was the difference between opt-in versus opt-out. Right now, the rule in place is they could sell your information unless you opt out. So you go, you
yeah, but you have to jump through hoops to opt out.
Right. So all it changes is if these rules had come into place, they would say you would have to opt in order to prevent us or to allow us to sell it. And you know how they do that? They do it by putting a little button that says, by using our service, we've updated our terms and services. You consent to agree to everything we've just done. And you get a 50-page document in there. You don't
exactly. They play games with you.
That's right.
And that's pointless. I mean, again, I have had over the years Internet service provided by AOL, Yahoo, and Gmail. And not once has it ever been pointed out to me in any clear, concise way. Sure, it's some 50-page tap dance nonsense because they all know that most of us won't see it. It was never pointed out to me, or I would have in an instant said no. This is another example of if we make it complicated enough, we can rip off a lot of people with their private information. Again, this is the kind of thing I like the free market. I believe in the free market. I am not a lover of all regulations, but this is a case where regulatory Washington should swat these people across the chops. I mean, hard.
Yeah, I mean,
this was a lousy vote. Pardon?
We're talking about moving into the direction of how the European Union handles privacy, which is much more rigorous than how the U.S. system has historically handled it.
Well,
in the EU, it applies to everybody. If you collect personal data, you must obtain informed consent before you can sell it and use it in this way, and that's effective.
Well, it ought to be effective. We'll come back and we'll talk some more about this. 1-866-50-JIMBO is our number, 1-866-505-4626 on The Bohannon Show. I think this is a really stupid idea, and I cannot believe that the Republican Party thinks that this will have a great resonance with their voters out there. I mean, we are losing enough privacy as it is, and I'll grant you that in some cases our loss of privacy is probably inevitable. This is not one of those cases. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show. As Shawn Tuma, our guest, is an attorney. He is in the practice of cyber law and with the firm of Scheef and Stone. And we're taking a look at the action taken by now both houses of Congress, which are headed for President Trump regarding online privacy. And this wipes out privacy protections for consumers on the Internet and opens up, I guess, effectively for any Internet service provider to sell information. Now, I know one member of Congress, a Democrat, Michael Capuano, offered this statement. I'll see if you think that this is a fair example. He says, "Just last week I bought underwear on the Internet. Why should you know what size I take or the color or any of that information?" Is that the kind of stuff that is going to be peddled out there?
Well, the problem is it's already being peddled. It's being peddled by the Googles and the Yahoos because they're already collecting it and selling that information.
Because the law has not covered them, and so instead of extending the law to cover them, Congress has just voted to to remove the law that covered other service providers.
That's right, Jim. You know, I was just thinking, if the Republicans in Congress are true to their intentions and they're intelligent, here's what they should do. They should offer a bill right now that takes those same restrictions that applied only to ISPs and say, let's apply it to ISPs and the other website companies as well that do this. Put it out there.
Well, they did the exact opposite. I mean, for the life of me,
they're claiming we would have been all for it, but it doesn't apply equally to the ISPs and the web companies that are already doing it. So
well, they could have changed that. They could have simply made it apply to everybody. I mean, that's a lame excuse.
Well, I don't think they could just change the regulations that way. I think the better way to do it.
I mean, they could. I mean, maybe there's a better way, but let's get one thing straight. They absolutely could. They've chosen not to. But what is a better way in your view?
Well, a better way would be to put a bill out right now, put a bill in Congress and say, we're going to take all of this that we were going to apply via the FCC to the ISPs and instead make it a law that's paramount over the regulations that applies to the ISPs and the website companies that we are claiming are being unfairly advantaged, and call them on it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care about those companies. I mean, this whole debate, it seems, has taken place on the notion of whether something is fair or unfair to the Internet service providers on the one hand or Facebook and Google on the other hand. My response, quite frankly, is screw them all. I don't care. How about the consumer? Just simply say you can't have our information unless we explicitly say that you may. I mean, to have it is one thing. To sell it, I guess, is what we're really talking about here, okay? In some cases, it is of necessity they're going to have the information, but to peddle it on the open market, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and the problem is if we really want to protect that privacy, then it doesn't help to stop the ISPs from doing it while the others are doing it at the same time.
Exactly. So do it to both of them. I mean, this is simple. This wouldn't take up a whole page of a bill. You could do this in a couple of lines. And so they clearly didn't want to. And so all they were concerned about is who can make the most money trading information. Now, let's say that and this, by the way, is purely hypothetical. It does not apply to me, okay, just for the record, in case anybody wants to know. Let's say that I take a lot of antidepressants and I'm really screwed up between the ears, and I've got a really interesting pharmaceutical history. I've got 5 shrinks, and they're all prescribing medications for me, none of which, by the way, for the record, is true. But for the hypothetical case involved here, let's assume that information is put out there. I mean, this could be very damaging to an individual who actually has this kind of information, but presumably, I mean, nothing, I suppose, would be off limits here. I mean, whatever I was getting in the way of pharmaceuticals, or let's say marital aids, if I'm not performing between the sheets, if I've got halitosis or hemorrhoids, I mean, I don't know if there's any limit on this information, is there?
Well, no, and Jim, imagine this. You're a teenage girl who comes home and your parents ask you if you're pregnant. And you are pregnant, but you haven't told them. And the reason they know is because they've been receiving targeted advertising from, I believe it was Target, in a real-life case, was sending advertising to the home because their analytics on that data learned that she was pregnant before she had told her family.
Let's talk to Mike in Bay City, Michigan. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, Jim. First off, I'd like to say you are exercising way too much common sense and too easy a solution to this problem.
Yeah.
Okay, that cannot be acceptable.
Yeah.
But I haven't had the internet or computer since 2002. That's when my youngest child graduated high school and went on to college and had her own laptop thing going. Mm-hmm. And I just had no need for it.
Well, you live a very, shall we say, separate existence from most of us. Just to keep my job alone, Mike, I could not divorce myself from the Internet. To maintain the relationships I have with many people, I couldn't do that. You've chosen, shall we say, an extremely analog existence that simply isn't an option for most of us.
Yeah, well, I guess It could be if people chose to be, I suppose.
Well, if I chose to quit my job, yeah, I suppose,
Well,
and cut myself off from most of my friends out there, yeah. But I mean, I'm not going to do that, and neither are 99% of the rest of the audience.
Well, that's true.
And I shouldn't have to.
All right. Well, you have a good evening.
Okay. I mean, I see what you're saying, and Mike certainly has found an answer, but I don't think that would be very convenient for most of us. We'll take a break and be back in a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show. We have Craig calling in from Vining, Minnesota. Hello, Craig.
I think what everyone needs to do is start using the Onion router.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
The Onion router?
Okay, I have no idea what the Onion router is.
It's a system of encrypted. What it does is it routes your email, your traffic through so many different routers that the sites do not know where you come from. And so it makes them, and also there's a search engine. The number one person that's selling your data is Google. And the number one way to avoid Google is to use something like DuckDuckGo, that actually doesn't keep or track your data. And then I think the next thing is also to use encrypted email, and doubly encrypted email, which means that it's both encrypted when you receive it, and it's also all the email that you save on the server is encrypted so that it's uncrackable. And you can get these encrypted email and encrypted routers that are actually based outside of the United States, such as in Switzerland or in Israel, where they have much stronger privacy protection. I think that's the direction people should go.
Let me ask you, how much do these services cost?
Nothing.
All right, then that's a good start. Now then, let me ask you how much of a hassle they are to use, either for you or for, let's say, people who ordinarily correspond with you digitally.
Download it as an app on your iPhone and install it. It's no different than, listen, people play Angry Birds, okay? It's the same thing. You download an app and then you start using it. After the initial sign-in process and the double password and the rest of it, you use it the way you would use any other router. You would use it any other internet browsing software. It's available for all platforms, Windows, all the rest of them.
All right, very good. Thanks, Craig. I appreciate that. Your thoughts, Shawn? Are we looking at readily available and simple solutions to this? Although, of course, not everybody will do this. And again, they shouldn't have to. But given the fact that apparently we will have to, does this strike you as a reasonable course?
Well, it is reasonable. And, picking up on Mike's call earlier, everything you put on the Internet, at some level, someone has the potential to get it. There's some risk to it.
Yeah. And I think most of us accept that. What we don't accept is the notion of this stuff being peddled to the highest bidder. That's the part.
What Craig said about Google is exactly right. And DuckDuckGo is an excellent browser, and it's no more difficult to use or a search engine than using Google or using Bing or something like that. As far as using the Onion router, that is a little more difficult for a novice, for someone who's just a user of computers. But then, email encryption is incredibly important. And when we're talking about cybersecurity as a whole, which is integrally related to privacy, because without security, you don't have privacy, then these are things that people do need to start considering, certainly with sensitive data.
Well, suffice it to say, here we sit. Have we heard from the Trump administration now that it's passed both houses of Congress? Is the president going to sign this?
I have not heard definitively, but I would be very surprised if he didn't, given his general anti-regulatory bent, and I would think Congress wouldn't have gone through all this exercise if they didn't think he would sign it.
I suppose. Well, again, this strikes me as a bizarre circumstance and not one that's acceptable, certainly. I can guarantee you my members of Congress will be hearing about it. But in the meantime, stay on the line, and we'll speak off air. Shawn Tuma is an attorney with a practice in cyber law and complex litigation with the firm of Scheef and Stone. And we're looking at the move first by the Senate and now by the House to allow just about anybody to put your information online up for bids. And apparently information of any sensitive nature doesn't particularly matter. So there you have it. I'm Jim Bohannon, and this is Westwood One.